I'm Julia, 24, fresh out of college and excited to start my new receptionist job at Porter and Finnegan Law, a well-known law firm downtown. My friends warned me about office life, the monotony, the hierarchy, but I was determined to make a good impression. I arrived early, as eager as any first-timer would be, hoping to break the ice with a few friendly greetings. But as soon as I walked in, the atmosphere hit me like a cold draft. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Sure, people were moving around, typing on keyboards and answering phones, but no one seemed to talk. I was introduced to my manager, Mrs. Gray, a tall woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and an expression that made me feel smaller with every glance. She showed me my desk, barely sparing a word, and handed me a thick binder of procedures, all in a tone as dry as the office air. Settling into my desk, I noticed something odd. The desk already had personal items: a chipped coffee mug with the words "Best Day Ever," a framed family photo of a little girl and her mom, and a yellow sticky note attached to the computer screen with "Smile" scribbled on it. I hadn't brought anything in yet, so I figured maybe it was a leftover from someone else. I brought it up with Mrs. Gray later, asking if I should clear it off. She barely looked at me, muttering, "The last person didn't need their things anymore." The way she said it made my skin prickle. Trying to lighten the mood, I asked what happened to them, but her face grew cold, and she turned away. The others nearby stopped what they were doing, stealing glances at me with, was it fear? Concern? I couldn't tell, but something was definitely off. As the hours dragged on, I felt eyes on me. Whenever I looked up, someone was watching me, but they'd quickly look away. By the end of the day, I was exhausted and unsettled. Maybe it was just first-day nerves, I told myself. Yet, as I left, I swore I heard someone whisper, "Don't get too comfortable." That night, just as I was unwinding, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Curiously, I picked up, expecting maybe a friend or someone from HR, but all I heard was a raspy whisper. "Leave that place." My heart stopped. Before I could respond, the line went dead. Shaking, I checked the caller ID again. But there was something even more disturbing. The contact was saved in my phone as the last receptionist. I don't know anyone by that name, and I'd certainly never saved it myself. A heavy feeling settled over me. Was it a prank? Some office hazing? But something told me this was different. I couldn't sleep that night. The eerie silence, the personal items, that strange call. My gut was screaming at me to leave, to walk away. But I needed this job. So, against all instincts, I went back the next day. My name is Alex, and I'm 27 years old. I just moved to Chicago to start a new corporate job. Excited? Yeah, I thought I'd be. My first day began with an early morning meeting scheduled in room 215, a windowless conference room. The office was quiet, and I was eager to make a good impression. After finally locating room 215 in the building's dim, older wing, I stepped inside. Right away, I noticed the smell, stale, sour, almost like something left rotting. The air felt thick, and the silence settled uncomfortably around me. I brushed it off as a musty old room and tried to focus. The meeting was brief. A few managers went over protocols, and that was it. Strangely, no one looked directly at me the whole time. They seemed tense, shifting in their seats, glancing down, almost avoiding something, though I couldn't figure out what. The room was small, yet felt overwhelmingly large, as though it held something I couldn't see. I chalked it up to nerves. After everyone filed out, I stayed back to gather up some empty coffee cups left on the table. Figured a little tidying might make a good impression. That's when I noticed the scratches. Underneath the table, thin but jagged lines cut into the wood. It was unsettling. I felt like a kid discovering something forbidden. I ran my fingers over them, trying to figure out if they were just random scuffs or something deliberate. They weren't smooth like from furniture being dragged, no. These looked like someone had clawed at the table. I shrugged, thinking maybe it was some stressed-out employee trying to take out frustration on the furniture. Still, the idea didn't sit right. I asked Sarah, the office manager, about it when I saw her. She went pale, staring at me like I'd said something deeply offensive. Her voice dropped. "You weren't supposed to be in room 215. It hasn't been used in months. Your meeting was in the main hall." My skin prickled as she walked away, leaving me frozen. Later, I found myself alone in the break room with Jared, one of the senior employees. I mentioned room 215 to him, half-jokingly asking what could have happened to make them abandon a perfectly good meeting room. He glanced around as if making sure no one else could hear and then leaned in. "You really don't know, do you?" he murmured, voice low. "Last year, a guy named Marcus had a breakdown in there. He was new, like you. Locked himself in, scratched up the table, the walls, anything he could get his hands on. They say he kept mumbling about hearing voices." I forced a laugh, trying to act unaffected, but my stomach churned. "What happened to him?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Jared's face went blank. "No one's seen him since. He left after that day. Just vanished." As I packed up to leave that night, I couldn't shake the image of those scratch marks. Each step toward the elevator felt heavier, the walls seeming to close in. And when I glanced back toward room 215, I could have sworn I saw a shadow slip under the door. My name is Maria. I'm 24, and I just started a new job as an assistant in the English department at this huge university in Boston. It's my first real job since graduating, so I was nervous but excited. When I arrived, they handed me a set of keys for my office and some storage rooms I might need access to. The carrying was heavy, packed with keys labeled with small fading numbers. One key, however, was unlabeled, and my manager, Miss Caldwell, didn't mention it during the tour. The building itself was massive, a maze of corridors and stairwells, some of which seemed to lead nowhere. Miss Caldwell hurried through the tour, showing me the basics and reminding me where the main faculty lounge and supply closets were. But she skipped over entire sections of the building. I noticed she never took me down the north wing hallway, even though there were a few offices there. When I asked about it, she brushed it off. "We don't use those rooms much," she said, giving me a tight smile. After lunch, curious about the mystery key, I decided to try it on some of the doors along the hallways. It didn't fit any doors on my floor, so I wandered to the lower levels. Most of these rooms were empty or used for storage, but I was determined to figure out what this key was for. At one point, while trying the key on a locked door near the stairwell, an older custodian named Paul caught me. He had that seasoned, "I've seen it all look that long time employees have. Why are you using that key on these doors?" he asked, his tone wary. I explained that I was just trying to see what the unlabeled key was for. He stiffened, his eyes darkening as he looked at the key in my hand. "They stopped using that key after. What happened?" he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Then he walked away without another word, leaving me with a chill crawling up my spine. What exactly had happened? And why was this key even on my ring? I thought about it the rest of the afternoon, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. It was just a key, I told myself. Nothing to worry about. But as the hours passed, I noticed something else odd. I placed my keys on my desk, but when I went to leave, the mystery key was gone. I searched everywhere, under my papers, on the floor, even in my bag. But it had just disappeared. Just as I was about to leave, I saw a small sticky note on my desk that hadn't been there before. My hands went cold as I picked it up. Written in shaky, scrawled handwriting were 3 words: "You've been warned." Panic gripped me. I felt exposed, like someone had been watching me, waiting for me to leave. I locked my office door quickly, my hands shaking, and practically ran out of the building. I didn't sleep much that night, replaying every moment in my mind, trying to figure out what that key had meant and who could have left the note. The next morning, I found a small envelope slipped under my office door. Inside was the missing key, only this time it was scratched, the metal worn down, almost as if someone had tried to destroy it. My stomach twisted as I read another note attached. This time, don't ask questions. I still don't know what happened in those rooms or who left me those warnings. But now, every time I hear footsteps in the hallway or see an empty, closed-off room, I feel like someone's watching.